Well, it's interesting because I've had to bump along in order to get there. And that's the beauty of learning when you start to shift into this space. First and foremost, I would say anybody who's moving into this space, you got to know who you are. You got to know who you are and what your worth is, because your worth equates into your overall package. So if you are really transactional and you're saying that I'm time for money, I think
Mhm.
you're always going to be selling yourself short. What are you actually
Mm.
selling? And I know that from my perspective, there's zero doubt in my mind because I've seen it. It's transformation.
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets, the podcast where we talk with successful career coaches on how they built their success and the hard lessons they learned along the way. My name is Davis Nguyen, and I'm the founder of Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, and even $100,000 weeks. Before Purple Circle, I've grown several 7- and 8-figure career coaching businesses myself, and have been a consultant at 2 career coaching businesses that are doing over $100 million each. Whether you're an established coach or building your practice for the first time, you'll discover the secrets to elevating your coaching business.
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets Podcast. I'm Kevin, and today we are joined by Kristina Holle. She's been in the HR industry for over 25 years and been in business for the last 3 to 4 years. She's the founder of Holle Consulting. Welcome to the podcast, Kristina.
Hi there. I'm really happy to be here.
Well, one of the things that you brought up was like, I've been coaching all my life, and so I always like to get into origin story, the beginning, the lore. And so what made you become a coach, and how did it become this like business that you run today?
Well, it's really interesting when you think about anybody when they're on their journey. You really never know where it's going to end up. And I never dreamed that I would be in this position, be an entrepreneur and like helping individuals and organizations unlock this piece. So I was a career girl, a corporate girl, multiple organizations, HR for, as you said, the past 25 years, had my executive designation, and I loved it. I loved it until I didn't love it anymore, right? So I realized that I was, very accomplished, very driven, very focused. And then it didn't matter how much I was doing. I didn't feel fulfilled the same way. And then I was seeing that with many other people, many other really brilliant leaders that eventually it's like, now, what are we supposed to be doing now, right? Because you're a high achiever and you're used to just driving results, but there's something deeper that's going on. So with that being said, I was working at Gap at the time, and I was going to do a authentic leadership training. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, because I'm going to do this because I feel like there's a need. We don't need more of the same. We need people to lean into their own personal truth and really bring those gifts forward. So I started doing this training, and I kept writing. So it was like 10 pages, 50 pages, 300 pages. I've got a book now. So now I've got the Authentic You Unleash Your Leadership Potential. And that book changed my life forever because I am here to say that there's a different way of leading that's much more healthier. I'm now doing all my work around that premise that some of these skills like emotional intelligence, authenticity, they're foundational. They're not nice to have. They're not a checkbox exercise. They're actually critical in the way that we work as we move forward. That's kind of the stuff. And then I end up doing a ton of cool stuff in this work that I do right now. Having podcast conversations.
With your favorite bald Asian guy. Just kidding.
Yeah, it's perfect.
You mentioned something really interesting. You said that you didn't feel fulfilled. You're a corporate girly. There's something, you didn't feel fulfilled. And what do you feel like it was kind of missing back then? And what do you feel like is missing for a lot of people, I guess?
Gosh, I have a lot of clients, and I can really recognize it in myself. There is many of us that, I would say all of us in some way or form, that we've been conditioned to be successful, what that looks like, how to drive those results. So you're kind of always on this treadmill of accomplishments, promotions, money, material things. So as you're running along on this treadmill, you think that you're really fulfilling the goal, but that's a temporary fix. It's not about something that's sustained. You're constantly looking for the next hit. You're constantly looking for external validation, maybe organizations or other people to tell you that you're good. This model around really leaning into your truth, you don't need anybody else to tell you that you're good. You're actually like on this whole other path of how you pull in your happiness, your success. You actually define your success. So success can be many different things, but many of us have not known that. So if you would have talked to me before all of this, maybe about like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I would have told you, whoa, what are you talking about? My ego was on overdrive around, no, this is my title. This is what I do. This is how I make money, but it's not working. People are burning out. People are exhausted. So I think that we need to really look at new ways to help people understand that you can be fulfilled when you learn to love yourself, know yourself, trust yourself, so you can self-regulate in a different way and bring in like different things, like different gifts that you might not have even acknowledged before. I have a lot of people that they end up moving into new space. They'll start their own businesses. They'll move because they're feeling anxious or frustrated or burnt out. They're kind of doing the same thing over and over again. So when we move into new space that way, it's pretty amazing.
You know, what you described, I've actually personally gone through, and I just imagine a younger Kevin kind of like at the external validation casino, trying to look for that next dopamine hit.
Right.
And so like,
It's a real thing.
it's a very real thing. And so you mentioned some interesting symptoms. People are exhausted, people are burning out, people are feeling anxious, people are feeling frustrated, right? And you also mentioned like, hey, the process of this, of kind of like relieving the core essence of this is like learning to trust yourself. So what does that kind of process look like for your end? How do you kind of do that? Walk me through how you do that with your clients.
So I think it's interesting because I never dreamed that I would be like, hey, I have a second book coming out next year, and it's all about, so the first book is The Authentic You. So there's the journey of self-discovery and really getting to know yourself. And in order to do that, it's really flying into the places where we're scared, we have self-doubt, we're judging ourselves. But when we learn to kind of go into we call it shadow space. You go into the shadow space, you start to kind of work through with that stuff. There's real gems. And you understand, you're like, okay, I got this. And then you move into new space of self-acceptance, love, even forgiveness of like things you might be holding on. Those are kind of like lead balloons that if you don't learn to release some of this stuff, you're bringing it into one chapter or the next. So that is one part from the original book. And now I'm moving into the shift framework. And shift framework is really helping on a larger scale, more, I would say, organizations and leaders to understand once we have self-awareness, then everything changes, right? Self-awareness, holistic leadership, innovative practices, flourishing teams, and true transformation. I have seen, and this is a big pet peeve of mine, for a very long time, I would see many people try and do these things when they're buzzwords, like checkbox exercises. Oh, we're going to do this now, but there's no substance to it. So what happens is that you're back doing the same thing within a 6-month period. But if you actually fuel yourself from within and you're like self-trusting and you're recreating and you understand where you might be falling off and being able to self-regulate, that's a game changer.
Yeah, it's like, I think a lot of this work goes kind of neglected, right? It's overlooked and people are like, yeah, a lot of lip service. Like, yeah, I know I should do this, but they never do it, right? Because honestly, what you refer to the shadow space, is it the same thing as shadow work? Would you use those?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so it definitely is shadow work. And I think that it's so funny because I run retreats and I've helped some people. Well, some, like all. Once you are feeling courageous enough to cross the threshold to get into the shadows and you really see how you're getting in your own way, it is the most amazing experience. It's the most beautiful experience of self-discovery, but you have to not fear it. You have to actually play around with it and realize that there's so many different modalities and how you can do work in that space and learn about yourself. And then what I've seen with my clients and even with myself, you start to have access to gifts that you didn't even know existed. because they're kind of buried in the shadow space.
Makes sense.
Come on, don't be scared. Let's do it. And then it's so awesome. And you just come out on the other end. So good every time. Yes.
Yeah. And so if flying into the shadow work is kind of like the initial step of like doing this work, what kind of gifts have you noticed people like accessing after it?
So I run in my retreat space intuitive painting classes where people have accessed their intuition on a deeper level. The whole irony around this is a part of the shift, I would say, is that we live in a society that is very intellect driven, not heart driven. And when we start going into shadow work, we start leaning into heart space, heart knowledge, releasing the armor, releasing the blocks. So you start accessing gifts that you may have had since a child. Maybe you can learn how to paint. I had someone just send me a message saying, thank you, they're doing their music again and they're having great success. I have someone else, intuitive gifts that start really like, because you start trusting yourself a little bit more on a deeper level. And I believe that the secret sauce is to have mind and heart. And then you are flying. But many of us, when we're in ego space, we're only working in mind. So we've blocked that intuition, we block the creative flow, and people get very creative and open with like new ideas, and then they believe in themselves and they start trying it.
Now, since I'm not sure if a lot of listeners know what shadow work is, but it seems pretty intimate, right? And so I would assume like when someone wants to do a coaching engagement with you, I'm assuming it's one-on-one, but I don't know. You tell me like the modality. What kind of modalities do you use? Is it group? Is it one-on-one?
Yeah,
what do you use?
Well, it's awesome. I do one-on-ones. I like people are drawn. Anyways, it's because of the energy, right? You open up all this energy stuff when you're doing good stuff, right? Like this alignment piece. And I'll do one-on-ones. I've done groups. The retreat spaces are like mind-blowing. So I like to personally, in my practice, I have an intimate group of what happens. It's been ladies. I've got guys asking if I will do that for them. I'm like, okay, all in due time. But it's like 6 to 8 women, and it's a 3-day intensive. And we do intuitive painting, we do yoga, we do breath work, we do tapping, we do all these different modalities in order to release stuck energy that is inhibiting you. So you have stuck energy if you get triggered. I'll tell you. Because there's something in there that is like I always say a trigger is a gift because it will tell you exactly where you need to do some shadow work. Because there's something in there that's still holding on. Maybe you feel dismissed and you were always dismissed as a little kid, and then somehow someone does it in a workplace. And then you're right back, and you're not, if you don't have awareness, you could really derail things for yourself. But when we work in this space and we understand, okay, now I can start to unlock it. It doesn't have to be only one modality. You can have a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun in retreat space. And then one-on-one, it's so beautiful. I've really helped people. They get emotional about the possibility of the life that they can live, and they can live the life that they want once they get past the blockages that have been put there over the years or over for a while.
The work that you're speaking about, it applies to pretty much everyone, right? I've seen it in men's groups, the divine feminine groups and all that. But I'm kind of curious, for the people that you attract into your ecosystem, who are kind of the people that you typically help?
Well, it's weird because I'm a strong believer that I'm attracting in exactly who needs to come to me, and everything is totally aligned. I think alignment is the most important part. But what is happening, I would say women, actually guys too, but people that are tired and burnt out and unfulfilled, and I would say that need to see possibility. And one of my gifts, and I didn't realize that this was a gift, is the capability to go into the shadow work and be like, hey, okay, we got it. Let's go through and come out of that. Because if not, it can feel like quicksand, right? And you don't want to be in a place of quicksand. You want to be able to get yourself out of that. So there is this wholeness aspect that I think that whoever needs that, like I don't know how to explain it. So I could tell you the scripted answer about who my target market is, But I don't want to do that because it's not about that. It's really about people that are feeling stuck, that need to understand their story, what their gifts are, and how to unlock it for themselves so they can excel. Because every single one of us have gifts inside of us. And what was happening from a corporate perspective, I would have people come into my office all the time and say, Christina, make me a leader. And I'd be like, I don't even see you. You're just going through the motions. And if you're going through the motions in life, you're going to burn yourself out. So that's what I would say. I would say it's interesting that you said the divine feminine, because I have always leaned very much into my masculine. And being in corporate, being in a senior level roles and very tough environments. And now as I've gone on this journey, I'm leaning more into the feminine. But the idea is that you need both. And some of us don't even realize that we need that. That's the overall connection of wholeness.
And it's not even like 50-50. When people think you need both, right? I think of more of the yin yang type of figure too for masculine and feminine, right? Like, yeah. Like if you're, us men too, we need to learn how to like listen and be a little bit nurturing at times,
100%.
right? Yeah. So
100%.
I could talk about this forever.
I know. I love it so much. And it's so needed. I have a show that I talk every night, and there's people in the States that come up. I have my 7:00 Authentic You Power Talks, and we talk about everything about empowering yourself and unlocking this. So that's why when you're like, well, who shows up? I can't even tell you how many people show up and are super vulnerable and like really open and wanting to learn. That's all you have to do is be available and open to that. There's a need right now.
I do want to ask something as well. This is kind of taboo. Money is always kind of taboo. And of course, you don't need to give any hard numbers. But the work you're doing, some of the work is like, we know deep down in our hearts, it's very meaningful, very transformative, right?
Yeah.
But if you summed it perfectly, our society is is intellectually driven. And so you can't really tie KPI to like internal growth or self-actualization sometimes. And so when you're structuring your coaching packages, this sort of stuff, how do you go about doing that? What's your philosophy behind like the pricing?
Well, it's interesting because I've had to bump along in order to get there. And that's the beauty of learning when you start to shift into this space. First and foremost, I would say anybody who's moving into this space, you got to know who you are. You got to know who you are and what your worth is, because your worth equates into your overall package. So if you are really transactional and you're saying that I'm time for money, I think you're always going to be selling yourself short. What are you actually selling? And I know that from my perspective, there is zero doubt in my mind, because I've seen it, it's transformation. So what is transformation worth? So when you start understanding what you're truly offering and you're putting that forward, then you build the package around that. And I think that it's so funny because this whole self-worth piece is really, it's so important, because if not, you could allow self-doubt or fear allow you to minimize what you're worth and what you should be offering. So it's directly related in there. And it's interesting because when I think about when I first left corporate, and I'm like, gosh, right? So they're getting a ton of corporate experience, and then plus this like amazing new experience where like doing transformational work, going deep and helping people really get the connection, the mind-heart connection, all that stuff. What is that worth? And now I know, like now I've based my packages on that. Whereas I bumped along in the beginning because you have to look at your experience. You have to look at what you're bringing to the table and what are you actually selling. And when you understand that, then you should be creating your packages around that. So I'll pause there.
Because one of the things I think about too, it's like, okay, if they're also like, I call myself a crystal bro, but like, I guess like if they are into work, I can definitely see it's probably easier something to talk about. But if someone's not quite aware, do they not even enter your realm, or do you have this like kind of like conversation? You kind of lead them into it, because the reason why I bring this up is because like I think people like Joe Dispenza and stuff, he kind of like this. He uses neuroscience as like a bridge into kind of the inner work and whatnot and the deeper work.
Yeah.
But yeah. How do you think about it?
I'm doing deeper work all the time. we're all calling it different things, right?
Yeah.
And this is actually extremely important that I would say, you can only go as far as you've gone. So when you are selecting coaches or if you're on your journey, make sure you've done the work so you can show up in a way that can support that. So Joe Dispenza, when he's talking, he knows what he's talking about inside and out because he's doing it. Just like my brand is all around authenticity and overall well-being and understanding that it's not just fractured parts. When we are looking at our overall well-being, and this is why we have to go deeper, is that we've got our physical, our intellect, our emotion, and our spiritual aspect. It is all encompassing. So we have lived in a society that's super performative, and we like this bit, but we don't want you to even think about this bit. So we're going to build this. But if you do that, that's like going to the gym and saying, hey, I want a full body workout, but only work out my biceps. It doesn't work. You have to be all encompassing. So you got to live it and breathe it. So, and really understand inside and outwards what exactly you're offering. So your question around, he's doing it through the neuroscience perspective, but I'm actually doing it from an emotional perspective and a deeper understanding of self. And I would say that my work is all about alignment into your truth, alignment into who you are. And when you do, you just start shooting up. There's a whole different level of connection, but we're saying the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just like, I'm always so curious about the catalyst into the work, because if you were talking to me 7 years ago and all about this, I'm like, yeah, it's kind of like that lip service I was talking about before, right? You just like, yeah, it's important, but you don't, until you experience it, it's very different. I do want to switch gears for a second. Something I'm also very, very interested in are kind of like your future goals, because you've been working in your business for the last 3 to 4 years. And I'm kind of curious, where do you want this coaching business to take you in the next few years? Do you have any secret dreams or ambitions no one knows about?
I'm loving well, I would say I'm loving where I'm at. It's been quite a journey understanding the pivot. I have completed my second book, so that will be out next year. It's called The Shift, right? And talking about helping people shift, helping organizations shift. As well, I want to have a shift certification program to be able to scale up within organizations to help them understand this bridging into this new way of leading and understanding that wellness is not a perk. It's actually essential in order for organizations and individuals to function properly. The world is moving so quickly with AI and everything that's going on around us, that if we are not grounded and knowing how to engage properly with each other as human beings, we're going to struggle. I can see it happening right now. The old model is not going to sustain the same way. It just can't. And it's not a fault to the old model. It's evolving. So I think it's just something for us to consider and think about. But my goals are totally aligned with that. I plan on doing more speaking events. I did quite a few keynotes this year, and I love it. I love it. This is about sending the message and empowering people to know that there's another way and that we need your gifts to come forward. But you can't do that if you're not self-aware. You can't do that if you haven't accessed and done the work. And that, I think that that's one thing I would say is another little pet peeve is like, you have a lot of people, and my whole thing is about authenticity, right? So being really you. And that means you got to do the work. So you got a lot of people who want to skip that step because it is one of those things that this quick fix kind of thing going on. You can't. If you're actually going to scale and sustain your brand and what your gifts are, they may be different than mine. You have to actually do the work and understand who you are. And that means you got to go into the stuff and love it at the end of the day.
Yeah, I definitely see that a lot in this. Very curious about too. So you have these goals, you love where you're at, you want to do the certification program in the future. I guess something I'm also curious about is like, in this season of your coaching business and life right now, what are some growing pains that you're kind of going through? Is there anything unexpected that is happening right now that most people can't see outside looking in?
I think it's as I get busier, it's the being able to make sure that I can maintain the authenticity of
Yeah.
what I bring to the table. And I know this is going to sound like, oh, Christina, I know I bring a certain little magic, but that's my special gift. And that is, how do I maintain that without diluting that magic as I get bigger? So that is a big thing in my head as I ponder. Is there automation, more people on the team, trying to figure out how that works? But it's exciting at the same time. And I know for a fact it's like this work is needed because people are showing up, and where we go, I know everyone's secrets. So it doesn't even matter because we all have stuff and people are feeling overloaded. So it's one of those things. If we learn to process and we move ahead, then you really can excel. So these are the things that I think about. Like, I'm like, okay, how can I reach more people?
One of the things that you mentioned, right? You said magic and possibility. First thing I thought about was actually Disneyland. Pretty interesting, by the way, because it opened.
I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, I love
Like an
that.
online one?
But like, obviously not Disneyland, but like, honestly, your retreats and stuff too, it just reminds me of like creating possibility of wonder and all that. Probably, obviously not with the trademarked Disney characters, obviously, but in your own way.
But there's magic that happens. Someone actually said at it was so funny, at one of the retreats, she's like, Christina, I don't know, do you have fairy dust here? I don't know what is happening because people are just moving in a new space. But that would be also a part of the overall goal. I would love to be able to do retreats all over the world. And because it's a part of that overall messaging of like leaning in and creating safe space so people can do it without judgment. And then you can go do that deeper explore. So I love the Disneyland experience because I think that there is magic. I've seen it totally unfold. And people are in awe of themselves when they do it. It's not about me. It's about being able to give them access to be able to do that.
You did mention a few things, right? You did mention as you're trying to expand and maintaining the authenticity, right? While growing bigger. You mentioned automations, bigger teams and stuff. What do you feel like, it might not be one thing, right? But what do you feel like that primary catalyst is for you, like to get that like bigger thing? Do you think it's a bigger team?
Yeah, I think it will be a bigger team, but I know this is going to sound really silly, but I live by this. I have to be in alignment. I have to be super clear. I'm very intentional about how I show up in my business and how I see my business. And when I am very clear, I can really start to kind of attract in things effectively. So yes, will there be new people? Absolutely, there'll be new people. But what they will be doing has still to be discovered. But I honestly, and I say this to all the coaches that are listening or anyone out there that wants to hear this, you being in alignment into you, which is believing in yourself on a deeper level, that when all the little doubt comes, doubt isn't our friend. Doubt comes knocking on the door, you just shut that door and say, no, thank you, not today. And you keep clear to what the dream is, what the vision is. And when you do that, it all starts to make sense. But you have to be very, very intentional about it. Like every day, intentional.
Something I'm thinking too, right? Because this all didn't magically hit you all of a sudden one day.
No,
No,
absolutely
it
not.
was a process. I'm kind of curious, like, I'm sure you had to invest in yourself in some sort of ways, whether that's like financially or coaches and stuff. So kind of curious, like, what's the most underrated investment and what's the most overrated investment through your experience?
Okay, this is going to sound really silly. I had a coach through the organization because I was a high performer and I was like, okay, cool. And I said to this coach, I want to be the best version of myself. Of course, my ego mind is like, I want to be the best. So I'm like, what are we going to do? And she was like, okay, well, let's start going on the explore. And I didn't know what that was. And that's all it took for me. I was like primed. I was ready to go. And then I opened up this door of painting and self-discovery. And those intuitive paintings Because I had, a really, I would say, a challenging upbringing where I was like, no one was ever going to know this stuff. And then all of a sudden I do these paintings and things start really moving along. And I did 30 paintings in one summer and I didn't know I was an artist. And next thing you know, things start changing and moving. And soon as you say yes to yourself, so I wouldn't even get too caught up in the investment because I didn't do that. I did a lot of self-discovery. I started reading. I wrote the book. So the paintings came first one summer. The next summer, the book was coming out. It was just like this flow of I'm open to trying new things. But I was terrified to first step into that. And once I did, the door doesn't stop. It just keeps going. And it's this gift that keeps offering. And I'm in awe still to this day. You never arrive. I'm like, whoa, okay, there's another book but I haven't really invested. If I'm being honest, I've invested in myself and really personally took the time investing myself, understanding where emotions get blocked, and because I was learning through the journey. And now I'm like, okay, there's something here. And now I've been bringing people through that, which I think is incredible. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Self-discovery seems like a huge part of this, right?
Huge. And because honestly, Kevin, here's a little quick story. If I met you like 10 years ago, you would meet a different Christina. And I went to a spa that I used to go to all the time. And I was talking about retreats now, and they came around and they were like this. This literally happened last summer. They're like, hey, aren't you in HR? And I'm like, oh no, I was, and I'm doing HR work and I've got my own company and all this stuff. And they're like, okay, because I'm having so much fun. They're like, okay, well, we can tell her. And I'm like, can we tell you something? And I'm like, sure. They're like, yeah, we used to bump you ahead in line because we were terrified of you. I was like, what? And I didn't know that was the vibe I was giving off.
Yeah.
But because I was so in that zone, and I would just show up, I wouldn't even say boo. It was the energy that I was bringing forward. But now this integration of self and understanding that other side, it's extremely powerful. And I like this person. I like the blend.
Well, last thing before we move on to the last question, it's like, so much of our society, you mentioned, yes, intellectually driven and stuff, but it forces a lot of women to like the corporate structure. When I think about my corporate experience and stuff, especially the women, right? Sometimes it was just really hard for them to turn off in the home sometimes and create like two masculine energies clashing all the time and stuff too. And so you really can't blame people because they like, that's kind of how like conditioned, right? We were talking about conditioning earlier, right? But that's why this work is so important because that's not our true selves. And when we start deconditioning those old self patterns, magic possibility happens. So not surprised about all the stuff that you mentioned, all the magic that happens when doing this work either. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I just want to add one thing to that. It's unrealistic for us to be carrying all of it. And women in particular, I was one of them. You want to be super mom. You want to be the perfect career mom. And you're there. And I have a lot that don't know how to speak for themselves. They're powerhouse women, but they just like, yeah, I got it, because they don't know how to function in a space that allows them to say, no, I don't have bandwidth. I'm not interested. And that is a societal problem. And the more we can start debunking the false narrative, like you matter and you don't need to prove your worth. You are worthy in this moment. You are more than enough. You don't need to keep carrying more things in order to feel as though that you fit. And when that starts to unlock, I'm going to be on that pedestal speaking about that all the time, because I'm in different space now and it's so beautiful. I engage with my family differently. I'm not carrying that tough armor everywhere, which is not healthy for us. I will pause there, but it's a really good point.
Last comment on that, especially as I've been traveling outside of, I've been away in Asia for like 1 year, right? And I just came back. I'm like super jet lagged right now, but yes. Like, I spent 1 year in Asia and went to all these different countries, but it's interesting. I feel like a lot of people are a lot happier because the masculine and feminine energies are
Yes.
distributed how they were supposed to be way long ago, where I think
Yes.
over time, Western society kind of like has us kind of like in the middle. And we see this with the dating element in America these days, where everybody feels like super miserable about dating. No one enjoys the experience, but that's pretty much my long way of saying like, hey, I really appreciate the work that you do. The work that you talk about is really important and doesn't really get the attention it deserves to, you know?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I want to say one thing for whoever needs to hear it. It's not woo-woo work. It's not that's only for those people. This is the most important work that you can do is the work that you do on yourself and to make sure that you're fully balanced and in tune to, as I said, the magic that resides inside of you, because it does. And when you start actually seeing the results where you are not living a world where you are performing or looking for other people to validate your existence, it is the most beautiful thing ever. And I think that's probably what you were seeing more in the Eastern society, where it's a little more balanced and it's very spirituality and well-being is very baked in, whereas Western is much more individualistic and this weird dynamic around like success and the pressure, right? And I think that the more we can talk about it, the better.
And just like one last thing, because I'm pretty sure that there's people listening to this and being like, oh yeah, it's still kind of woo-woo. Like, you know, what does Kristina know? It's kind of like woo-woo. But I also feel like, yeah, but like, as someone who's kind of done very similar work, right? I've been head of sales and I've done like tons of sales calls and stuff. But by having that yin yang, because I'm a guy, right? And I have that more masculine energy, but by adding more of that feminine, that 20%, whatever that ratio is, into everything, I can hold space better, have real conversations, and I feel like it's authentically me. And so there are direct KPIs, but it's not like there are KPIs associated with it, but it's not direct sometimes. But what I realized is that it changes your state of being. And I think that is
100%.
the most important thing. So last question for you. How can people find you and connect with you, Kristina?
Go to my website, just filter it there. I have assessments for people to do if you want to kind of see where you're at. Maybe there's particular areas that you need to work on. And I think that that's a part of the awareness piece. It's the shift assessment. So you can do that for free. But my website is hollyconsulting.com. You can look me up there. Definitely feel free to reach out. You can see all the things that I'm doing there. I hope maybe someone ends up coming to a retreat, or if you're feeling stuck, please come and let's chat. I think it will make a big difference.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Kristina, for just sharing all the knowledge that you had today and just really pointing out some things. And I think, yes, we talked about deep stuff about shadow work and all that and masculine and feminine energy. But, the biggest thing is hey, what else is possible? Let's create some magic in your life and see what else is possible.
Awesome.
So that's the fun part. Cool. Thank you so much, Kristina.
So much
appreciate you.
possible.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Kevin.
That's it for this episode of Career Coaching Secrets. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this episode to catch future episodes. This podcast was brought to you by Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, or even $100,000 weeks, all without burning out and making sure that you're making the impact and having the life that you want. To learn more about our community and how we can help you, visit joinpurplecircle.com.